This is why the right keeps winning, but how the left can start to win too. It all comes down to strategy, which the left and DNC doesn't have. So I'm going to put everything I know together to hopefully help people that are wanting to resist this administration and make a difference in politics. I even have notes so I don't forget anything. The number one thing that anyone that wants to resist or impact public policy in this country needs to understand is this organizational chart of the United States government, bureaucracy, and what they do. We're all familiar with the legislative, executive, and judicial branch, and we know about the Constitution. Instead of thinking of the Constitution as something from the top down, think of it as actually the confinement, right? So let's say we're playing a game of takeaway and the Constitution is the room that we cannot leave. Another important word here is going to be mechanism. The mechanism, which is going to expand or restrict, so we'll say open or close doors, right, in this confinement, is obviously going to be court cases, the law, Supreme Court. This is pretty much where the left stops, right? We don't talk about how important all of these departments are, and we don't talk about all of these agencies. All of these agencies here at the bottom inform. So when you're doing research and wanting to advocate for something, I want you to use these as sources. When we talk about upholding institutions, it is these here at the bottom of the chart. The next is the whole mechanism thing I told you about and the obstacle that comes with it. So there are basically two obvious ways we, the people, engage with this system. That, of course, is voting. What's the obstacle? The Electoral College and redistricting. All of these agencies here also need a lot of contractors. So what? The contractor. How? The bidding process. What's the obstacle? The standards. Standards are going to be set forth in something called an RFP or a request for proposal. You can learn more about that at any government office of procurement site. That's where we begin to get into strategy. We know that all of this also repeats itself at the state level and then of course the city. They're going to have these offices too. The entire gist of the Republican strategy works within all of these departments. Their eyes are on these agencies and departments at all time. And think about it, it makes sense. If they want to make public funds private, like I said, they're going to want those contracts. And what is the obstacle? RFPs, aka the standards. Who sets forth those standards? Are highly educated, qualified institutions at the bottom that do the research. This is where the deregulation element of the Republican strategy comes in, right? Because without all of these high standards, it's easier to get government contracts and it's easier for businesses and corporations to do whatever they want. That's why the overturning of the Chevron doctrine, which preferred to listen to the top experts on things, being overturned is such a problem. In addition to the patients and looking at government as a whole, the right has something else, and that is an apparatus that comes from an exorbitant amount of money. This means that there is an extra thing, right, on the right that is strategically placing people into office and trying to get people placed into these positions. That's why Mike Huckabee was at events that were pro-Israel that I was at 12, 13 years ago. That's why he has these books out about how much he loves Israel, and he's been talking about Israel when he had his Fox News show. And now, over a decade later, he's the ambassador to Israel. They know what they're going to do and who they're going to put into positions, and they don't care how long it takes. But it doesn't really make sense, right? Because we know that liberal voters tend to be more educated than Republican voters. So how do we get them to vote? They don't even know that they're voting within this system. And that is because I would view Republican intelligence as something like this. The people at the top are so smart, okay? This is going to be your Russell Voughts and stuff that have been writing Project 2025, that are strategically placing people into office and manipulating November 5th, right? And then you kind of have some a little bit beneath them, some average intelligence, but the majority is all of these people here controlling everything they do. Whereas on the left, it's a lot more sporadic, right? And then we're going to have a smaller population of people that just don't care but kind of get it right based on emotional intelligence. But the problem with such a staggered level of government understanding, and part of that comes from there's different types of intelligence, right? Like some people might be really good at navigating systems of oppression. Some people might be really good at just knowing the framework of government. The problem there is going to be like the identity politics, right? So we don't have an apparatus telling us what to do, making sure that there's somebody in every single elected office, etc. So the way that we combat that is by becoming as intelligent and as knowledgeable as possible to all get closer to each other so we become the apparatus with knowledge that they have with money and manipulation. Next disparity we can correct with information is the Overton window. Here is a scale of people that are very far left, really blue to as far right as possible. The Republicans are actually always trying to rally their base because their base, the farthest right, that 10%, the noise from the margins, is the most likely to vote. So they know that they can actually bank on getting the majority of a minority to make up for what they don't get here in moderate to, your typical conservative. They're striving for this. The left has an opposite problem that the right actually manufactured, and that is that our 10% on the margin, right? These are the people that would not vote because of what was happening in Gaza. Our 10% is the least likely to vote. So whereas they're going to get 90% of that 10%, we might get 10% of that 10%. So the left tries to get the most of their votes from being as moderate in the blue as possible. So that's going to be like on a bell curve. So we are automatically chasing the Overton window to the right, and we are always playing defense. Our job is more labor intensive and exhaustive because we're going to protest after the bill has been passed. We're going to call our legislators right before the bill is going to get voted on. And it's really not efficient. So the main strategy here is to get back to a very aggressive offense. So how do we impact our November 5th? I'm going to give you some rules about voting, and I think this will help make sense. The first rule of voter engagement is that when more people vote, the left wins, given that there is an option on the left. This is also very labor intensive because all the DNC does in every single election is a get out the vote effort. And it's not going to work because it takes a lot of work to go register 20 people to vote. You might be walking door to door. It takes a lot of money. This brings us to problem number 2 is that a lot of organizations, and one of my huge concerns in Florida right now, is that they will set quotas, and quotas make people make mistakes and do the process wrong, and it can always be challenged. It is very easy to, with the stroke of a pen and a cry to the auditor's office and a good attorney, to get 2,500 people taken off the rolls in one day. The thing that needs to be advocated for and put on every single ballot is automatic voter registration. But even that's not enough, right? Because in about a third of states, you can automatically, without notification, be taken off if you don't vote enough. And a lot of people don't vote in primary. I always hear liberals say, well, they're playing dirty, we should play dirty too. But they mean it in a break the rules or the law way. And like I said, no, they are working within the confines of the law and they change it if they don't like it. I do not understand why in Florida, where there are these 2 very important races, and we know that some of Trump's biggest, best attorneys are in Florida, why they are not preemptively striking down these complaints to the auditor, and why, especially in a state without an income tax, we're not proactively questioning the validity of a lot of the voters in Florida that are not even there most of the time or are possibly residents of 2 states. Rule number 2, another thing that's going to raise the amount of people that vote, which means raise the odds of somebody on the left getting elected, is that when there's a really important ballot initiative on the ballot, people are more likely to vote. Consider that with rule number 3. Less people vote in midterms, primaries, and local elections. And when I tell you school boards are so important, they are so important. So do you hear the strategy there? Don't just put ballot initiatives on the major elections. Have them on all of them. All you have to do is start a petition. And I've given you some great ideas to roll with. And number 4, this is where they just get downright dirty. People that have ever held office before, it doesn't matter coroner, it doesn't matter auditor, city council, school board, if they have ever held any office before, they are substantially more likely to get elected than if they never had. And here is where I keep saying the right spends most of its money in the Midwest in the exact same way that they are okay with just rallying that base of voters, even though it's such a small portion of the entire Republican ticket. They pump millions into states like Iowa, South Dakota. Who cares if it's worth 3 electoral votes? Because so many of these districts have people run unopposed. So they just give people money to hold an office knowing that they will be able to more than likely take a bigger position in the future. If you are a liberal or left of center, you need to be pumping your money into tiny little races in tiny little red states. I want you to look at this graph. This graph demonstrates where the funding for our Democratic challenger to Kristi Noem for governor was in South Dakota. It's almost all from South Dakota. Nobody was giving this candidate money. Now, this is where Republican Kristi Noem got her money, from all over the country. She's not educated, she's underqualified, she has no redeeming qualities, but by pumping money into her, they got her into this position, and now she is our Department of Homeland Security Secretary. And another way that the right utilizes this is you just think that these people run for office. No, the right seeks these people out. When they're sending these Heritage Foundation letters, when they're sending surveys and finding things, they are finding people that they are going to groom for office. Peter Thiel, his whole life has been spent finding little incel tech bros and grooming them for public office. Another way that they do this, as they're grooming and selecting the people that they want in office, is the people around them don't like these people, right? There's a reason that like Hillbilly Elegy and stuff came out, and I believe it's actually because they wanted J.D. Vance to run in 2016. They're not only selecting and grooming these people, but they are creating celebrity around them with media, whereas the left just hopes that somebody runs. Anyways, a fifth and most important rule is that once something is passed somewhere, it is incredibly more likely to pass in another place. So these red states are where not the lawmakers that we vote for, but this apparatus I'm telling you about, Heritage Foundation, ALEC, APEC, they write legislation and they give it to the legislators to get it to pass. And once it passes somewhere, it can pass in another state. And it typically goes like South Dakota, Tennessee, South Dakota, Missouri, or something like that. And the more times it passes in different states, the more likely it is to become a federal policy, regardless of how popular it is with the people. I have an apparatus like this on the left, and I do think it would be worthwhile to invest some money into policy writing to give to our legislators, because of the fact that, like I said, they are always playing defense, just trying to prevent the Republicans from getting through what it is they're trying to get through. And another really important thing, if you're worried about the money on the right, is a deep secret, is that they are awful with the way they spend it. That could easily be countered with efficiency, but I'll have to do that in another video, and I'd be happy to tell you the stories of the weird shit that